Hello and welcome to Good Clinical, a podcast and YouTube channel dedicated to showcasing the future of medicine and human health. Today's podcast episode is another in our partnership with Te Titoki Mataora, the MedTech Research Translator. Today's guest is Dr. Robyn Whittaker. Robyn is the Director of Research, Evidence and Clinical Trials at Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand. Welcome to the podcast, Robyn.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
It's fantastic to meet you, but I must say that title of yours is quite impressive. It's a bit of a mouthful. I didn't rehearse in the car. I actually rehearsed upstairs before we started filming this. But so Director, Research, Evidence and Clinical Trials, Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand. That sounds like an all-encompassing role, but in a nutshell, what's it about?
Yeah, it is quite a mouthful. It's really about trying to raise the profile of using evidence in our health system to create a real learning health system. Physically, I actually look after the library teams who provide access to all our clinicians to electronic resources and journals, and also all of the research support teams. So they provide all of the assessment and approval for research that goes on in Te Whatu Ora healthcare.
Because when you say like evidence-based, you kind of think, well, of course healthcare is evidence-based, but it sounds to me like you have to make it more so, otherwise it would drift in a certain way that might not actually follow the current standard of evidence that we have available. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, I mean there's an old saying that it takes 17 years to get something that's been proven in research into practice, right? But the purpose is to really support lots of active research happening within our health services with our clinicians, and then it's much more likely that they will pick up those new practices that have been proven effective and put them directly into clinical practice, straight from kind of research into practice.
Yeah, and that's domestic research, right? Because obviously you can't just transposition research that's been conducted, say, in Poland or whatever, that they do, and go, oh, let's apply it to New Zealand, because that's not a matched fit. Same with some places in the US, right? It has to be kind of bespoke. I kind of hate that word, but I'm not sure what else you could use to describe it. Bespoke to your, you know, the makeup of the population, the makeup of your delivery or your healthcare delivery system, and then the makeup of your, I suppose, resources that you have available.
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of different types of research, right? So yeah, we do take part in big multinational studies. You know, if you think about new cancer drugs, for instance, then they're usually done across multiple countries, and we're really keen to join those kind of trials as well. But then we have what we call investigator-initiated research that happens within our health services when they want to try something new, or to co-create and co-develop something new with their patient population. So in all types of research are really important. And then we do pick up research sometimes and initiatives, innovations from overseas, and then what we will do is we'll test that. So it may not be a full, randomised controlled trial type research, but it may be a pilot or a testing, say, like of a new AI tool. We'll test that within our population, within our data, to see if it's going to work for us or if it needs to be tweaked and adapted for our local population.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a big topic. I don't know, we could kind of get lost in it, like do we go all the way down the randomized controlled trials, or like the IITs where you've got, a specific interest of a specific population. You want to have a bit of a play, investigate something. But how did you arrive in this role? Again, it's like quite an important role to make sure that their healthcare system is delivering quality services grounded in best practice and current research. But how did you get to this point? What's your background?
Yeah, so I'm a public health doctor. So I've worked in our health system forever, but also I am an academic. I work at the University of Auckland as well, and I have for many years been doing my own digital health research at the School of Population Health. So I had those dual interests of the real university research world, as well as the practical, trying to put that into practice within the health system. I was previously working at Waitemata in our Institute for Innovation and Improvement, really trying to pick up the far end of that that, things that have been proven. We know they'll be effective, but we're not doing them yet. How do we try and implement them in our services? So this new role came about when Te Whatu Ora Health NZ was created, and they wanted to put a national team, national leadership over that area of research and innovation within the new structure. So it just seemed kind of like a perfect fit of all of my interests.
Yeah. What do you think's easier, or what do you think's harder, like doing the research itself, and getting the result that is beneficial versus actually implementing the outcome of that research, say a new intervention or a new piece of technology or a new service?
Yeah, definitely implementation.
Right.
And that's like worldwide.
Yeah.
It is really hard to scale something and make it sustainable at the end of a research trial, because in a research environment, you're doing things quite controlled circumstances and environment, not necessarily always really real world, or at least doing it on a small scale with a small number of people. And then now that we're a national health organisation, at the end of that research, we're trying to scale that to the whole country, to, how many hospitals that we've got, what was 20 district health boards, 80,000 staff. We've got services that are now spread over the whole country. To try and implement something new is quite a big thing to do. There is a whole area of like implementation science, which is around how to try and do this well.
Yeah. And I suppose New Zealand is somewhat idiosyncratic in that we had, the 20 DHBs, and now it's one, coherent system, but they were all operating in slightly different ways. They had different frameworks, different SOPs, different policies, different procedures. And now trying to harmonize that, like that in itself seems like the biggest implementation task of all time. And then on top of that, they had different like digital access to, how they were sharing or not sharing, but keeping and processing data on patients. So you could go nuts trying to think of how complicated the whole scenario is.
It is huge, right? And that's why it's still an ongoing mission, really doing all of that work. Yeah, and that was part of my role in this job, is to at least try and standardise some of the processes around research across the country by bringing together everyone who's doing this kind of work around the country.
So can you provide some examples of what that might look like moving forward? Is it maybe, using some kind of research that's ongoing? Yeah.
Yeah, so I said before about, this kind of multinational studies. So there's often researchers are wanting to do a study now that is across the whole country. So previously you had to go to each individual district health board to get approval and assessment. And they, as you said, each of them would have their own way of doing that and their own sign-off processes and, local Māori review and engagement. And so to do that 20 times round is quite a mission. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to set up a standard process for that kind of locality approval to happen for national studies.
Yep.
So we're putting in a digital system because there wasn't one at all. So we're putting in a digital system to try and kind of take care of that whole management and approval process so that everyone can see what's been done.
Right.
We can get kind of national sign-off for some things. We can have one standard contract, one kind of costing tool, and one negotiation with the sponsor of the research, and then really streamline that whole approval process so that research can get started much quicker.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I used to work at Novartis, so Big Pharma. And when I joined them, I was working in a regional project management capacity looking after Asia Pacific, like 10 countries. And I asked, the leadership, why aren't we going to New Zealand more with some of these interventions? And they said, it's just too hard. There are too many DHBs to go through. We might only get a couple patients per hospital system or per DHB. It's just not worth our while. Yeah. But if you can go to a centralised place, do it once, and you have access to all 20 hospitals or however many would be willing to participate, it just speeds everything up. And pace means it's more it's cheaper, so it's more cost effective. Exactly. And then the downstream impact is that the patients would benefit. So I was actually really upset at that point because, obviously I'm a Kiwi and all these patients are missing out on, what Novartis had to offer in a clinical trial setting. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
These are one of those initiatives.
That is definitely what we're trying to do, and as you said before, with the digital systems too. So there's a huge amount of work going on national data platforms for Health NZ, and that will allow us to give people, a bit more, a way of recruiting, basically, that we could actually look and say, yeah, there are X many patients who have this condition across the whole country, and we could offer a trial to them.
Yeah, and that's a huge benefit as opposed to, I think, like finger, look at the finger in the wind, approximately 5.
Yeah.
That's not really beneficial to anyone. So I know in my day job, I'm working with a few of the private hospital systems that Australia have, and they've set up a framework not too dissimilar. It's all centralized, but they have a data sharing platform where they know exactly how many patients with a certain diagnosis they have within their, say, 10 private hospitals. So applying that to a public health system that we have in New Zealand, opening up those patients to be able to participate in research, hugely beneficial. The Liggins Institute just issued, a couple of years back now, I think it is, time's flying, issued a kind of prospectus or a blueprint for what clinical trials in New Zealand should look like. And you mentioned before we got rolling that's kind of like the Bible now to the implementation. Can you talk a little bit about what that might look like?
So that was incredibly useful coming into this job. That it was a huge research project nationally, actually, involved lots and lots of researchers, and they also consulted with researchers from across the country. So they put out a report called Enhancing Aotearoa New Zealand Clinical Trials. And that's been really useful, as I've said, because it really documented what all the issues were with the current system and made some suggestions about what it should look like going ahead in terms of really trying to build up the national infrastructure to support clinical trials and other types of research happening across the whole ecosystem. So not just within Health NZ, but broader than that as well. But so that was really useful. So I didn't have to go and do that background work, right, to find out where the issues were and what things needed to be done. We've basically got a bit of a blueprint around what is needed in terms of infrastructure and support.
Yeah, so, and that took a number of years to assemble, didn't it?
Yeah.
Like it was a Herculean effort to put that together. So great going, guys.
Yeah.
Very cool. I mean, we could get stuck talking on this because this is my bread and butter, clinical trials. How do we make New Zealand more of a place to do research? How do we get more sponsors to come down here? But that's not why we're here. Maybe you can shelve that for another episode.
Yeah.
But so you're aside from that, which blows my mind. So you're working at Te Whatu Ora on this big implementation, and but you're also supporting the MedTech ecosystem with Te Titoki Mataora. So how did that come about? Naturally, Te Titoki Mataora, MedTech IQ, all these other bodies are there to foster more commercialization of medical devices and naturally bring the ecosystem together. So how did you get involved?
I actually got involved to start with the MedTech Core, or Centre of Research Excellence, which came before this current program. So that was really focused on the research of MedTech, medical devices and technologies, and we had some funding to stimulate new ideas and new research projects and collaborations. And the idea has always been, it still is with Te Titoki Mataora, to try and bring together groups to work on these new ideas. So bring together the clinicians and the health services with the academics and the researchers and the bioengineers, plus Māori and plus a commercial pathway, right? So I started off working on the research side. I did some of my own research in the MedTech Core, which is around digital health programs. And then that had morphed into this new program with Te Titoki Mataora. My main role is with the clinical translation module. So that's co-led with John Windsor in Auckland Hospital and Brian Robinson in Vic in Wellington. Okay. We really try and support the clinical trials end of this, and we really try and help connect people up is the main job. So we try and provide the connections to clinicians and health services for these new forming groups, the researchers and the startups, and people applying for RAP funding. If they don't have those right connections, then basically we try and find them for them and connect them to clinicians that we know that work in that area who are really keen to talk about innovations and MedTech and get them involved, and then help support clinical validation trials.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I often say on this podcast, I think I've said it many times, that your network is your net worth. You know, like I've had many an idea that on paper, on an Excel spreadsheet, would make me a millionaire. But that's because I've just kind of had a positive feedback loop on my own machinations. But if you bring in people that are experts with an objective eye, right, that know their stuff, passionate about it, but can also say, hey, you're barking up the wrong tree, or hey, tweak it to this, or hey, go for it. That's really important for these people that are trying to make something out of an idea, right?
Yeah, it's so true. So you know, a lot of the researchers, they have the most amazing ideas, but they need to kind of then ground that in the reality of how the service actually happens on the ground, what the context that clinicians are working in, as to, you know, what the problems really are and how to turn their ideas into reality and within that context. Because if you can't make that idea work in a hospital or a health clinic or something, you know, in everyday practice, then it's not going to fly. So bringing in that expertise really early on, will really challenge them to turn that into a really good idea.
So they'd get involved as early as the RAP1 stage. So that's the, you know, Rapid Acceleration Research
program.
Accelerator Program. Jeepers. All these acronyms in my world.
Yes, that's the idea, is that that first one, that RAP1, is around bringing the collaboration together. And so if people don't have all of those necessary aspects of the different perspectives covered off, then you can still apply for it, and we'll actively try and help you to find those connections.
So I suppose over your career working in all these different areas, so your public health research, MedTech core, Te Whatu Ora, you must have the most impressive Rolodex of contacts that you can, you know, fire these people off to work with.
If we still actually had Rolodexes.
That's right.
But between us, you know, we have got some pretty extensive networks, and also we have an expert advisory group. So we've got an initial group too of people who have basically put their hand up and said they will help us find people. And we have an online forum. So we have ways of trying to find all the right people around the country who would be keen to help out.
Yeah, because I mean, in these conversations with the TTM episodes, I'm really inspired because there's a lot of, you know, New Zealand is really, I think, has really struggled and taking people with great ideas and turning and translating it into a real world product. Like that's like capturing magic in a bottle, or lightning in a bottle, right? Like if you need a whole lot of different resources to make that happen, you know, it's the money, it's the human capital, it's the, you know, the infrastructure around it, it's the willingness, it's the can-do attitude, it's the visibility of other successes. You know, it makes a really nice recipe, but you do need all those elements. You can't just have one. You know, you can't just have, look at the success of Fisher and Paykel. Okay, cool. Now we've got a burgeoning MedTech translation ecosystem. You know, you need all the other aspects too. So I'm really encouraged by, you know, the likes of what TTM are doing and the networks that have been developed out of it. And of course, not every project is going to be a resounding success, but that's not really the point, right? Because with every program, with every project, you are further developing and leveraging that network and the experience and growing it, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. And I think this is the great thing that TTM does, right, in the whole MedTech program, is they try and wrap all of that around the people who have great ideas, right? And it may not be that every single idea or the first idea they come up with is the one that's going to win, but the people who are coming up with ideas are the key, right? They're a fantastic resource, and then the program tries to, you know, it comes with money, which is awesome, but then it also tries to wrap around all those other things so that they will be successful at some stage, even if it's not that first idea. But they'll have those collaborations, and they'll build on those collaborations, and they'll keep coming up with good ideas, and they'll be learning as they go, learning about how to give, you know, regulation and how to tick all the boxes and how to do the clinical validation trials. And so even if it's not that thing that is successful, in the end, we want those people to have a good experience and to learn enough that maybe the next thing that they collaborate and work on will be the one that succeeds.
Yeah. Someone said to me that what you were saying kind of reminded me of the difference between resilience and anti-fragility. And being anti-fragile is more important than being resilient. So like anti-fragile is the opposite of being fragile, right? So fragile, you got to treat with kid gloves, and you don't want to hurt it, and you don't want to expose it to the elements, and it's got to be kept in a nice glass case kind of thing. Whereas anti-fragile is like, you might get knocked around, but you're not going to fall to pieces.
Yeah.
And that's something that you want out of an entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? The resilience is, okay, we can keep going and we can, keep things moving, but it's the anti-fragility. Like, that you're going to fall out of the case onto the ground, but you're not going to break.
Yeah. That's good. I like that.
I need to take that to heart myself. Find myself fall into pieces regularly. But maybe looking at everything from a 1,000-foot view, what are the parts of the kind of ecosystem that work really well, and maybe some that need some fine-tuning? And I imagine some of that fine-tuning might work in with what you do at Te Whatu Ora as well.
Yeah, I think there's still plenty for us to work on, but I think that this is an ecosystem, right? And it's all about the partnerships and making sure you've got all the right people and the right partners in there. And I think that's what we've kind of been working on. So just like an idea doesn't get anywhere on its own if you keep it to yourself and you don't talk to anyone about it. You've got to talk to as many people as you possibly can about your idea, and then it will keep getting better and better as you adapt it. And it's kind of the same with this whole ecosystem, in that if we can't do all of this internally ourselves just within Te Whatu Ora. We don't have the funding, we don't have all the expertise and the knowledge and the networks to be coming up with the new ideas and the new MedTech. We need to partner with everyone as well. And so the partnership of Te Whatu Ora and MedTech IQ is really important part of that, but it's also then all the extra networks that they bring in terms of all the industry partnerships, the university partnerships, Callaghan, everyone else all being a part of that ecosystem and trying to contribute to a really good MedTech innovation pathway is what makes that work. And I think, this has been a long time in the making, but it still feels like it's still relatively nascent and finding its way, and we're just starting to get into a really good rhythm of lots of new ideas coming in. There's pathways for them to go through, there's support for them, and there's commercial pathways, and there are now spin out companies coming out the other end that are doing really well.
And they send a very resounding signal to everyone that it's very much possible to do it from this little island nation archipelago of ours. You might not stay here forever because the market isn't here. Let's be real. We're only a small slither of it, but you can make it happen from here. I recently went to the Oz Biotech conference in Melbourne, and I kind of felt like a country bumpkin over there. Little Kiwi over in the big smoke of Melbourne. But seeing how much federal and local state government money gets thrown into various ecosystems over there, it was quite almost frightening, you could say. Like, one of their buildings, the Peter MacCallum Centre, was built in 2016 to the tune of $1.1 billion. Like, hearing that number as a Kiwi boy, you're like, that is just crazy. That's a huge amount of money. You could never imagine that kind of money being thrown around here. I mean, that was funded, a little bit of philanthropy to the tune of I think 100 million, and then 500 million each from federal and state government. So we're talking big dollars. And then that's just one of a number of, in a square block of 5K squared of buildings and institutes that are doing this. That's not to downplay New Zealand, but it's just to show how much we have achieved with a markedly smaller amount of pot of money, shall we say. And it speaks to that kind of can-do attitude, the number 8 wire approach of Kiwis, and the willingness of the ecosystem to come together. And I kind of say that because, you go, well, there's a lot of money sloshing around over there, and that tap can't run forever. And what's going to happen when the tap does start to turn off a little bit? Because it will. I mean, things don't last forever. And, part of it's competitive because there's a lot of government money, whereas here it's a little bit different. I feel it's a lot more collegial, and we do take care of our own. I don't know. That's kind of just some musings from from that trip,
Yeah.
but you know.
Now, I'll get this wrong because I'm terrible at this, but I can't remember who it was. Was it Shackleton or someone like that who famously said, well, we don't have any money, so we'll have to think? you know,
Right.
I think that is pretty much the Kiwi way. We get very, very jealous when we go places like Australia because there does appear to be a lot more money going into this kind of space. But yeah, we have competed very well on a lot less money, and the fact that we don't have a lot of money to throw at developing new things, it does make us, you know, slightly more focused, I guess, on what is going to work, and trying to get everything, you know, right and have the best conditions for succeeding if it is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Because we can't, unfortunately, just fund loads and loads of ideas.
Yeah.
And we can't fund beautiful new buildings like that either. But, you know, it's not about the buildings.
No, exactly. I mean, what's the quality of the science being generated from there? That's the most important thing. Or, you know, the product or service, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think the funding environment might change in the longer term? Because I know there's obviously been a change in government recently, and there's been a few different industries saying, well, you know, there's been the taps really turned off a little bit. Do you think that's going to change in the long term, or is it going to be the more selective approach, more critical analysis of what we do where we do put our money?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hard to know really where that's going to go. I mean, there certainly is a bit of a focus on innovation and, you know, supporting New Zealand companies to innovate and to do well. But I think, the MedTech IQ and Te Titoki Mataora, they've been really successful at continuing this funding in this time of austerity. So it's a great thing that we have had this continuity of being able to invest in new ideas and the seed funding and then the accelerator programs.
Yes.
You know, like the Callaghan Accelerator as well. I mean, that's fantastic that we've had that consistency of funding for this end of developing new things, because that's that didn't exist beforehand.
No, that's right.
So
it kind of speaks to how good the model is that they have with the cutoffs, Rep 1, Rep 2, Rep 3, and thereafter. You know, it's like, well, it's the critical analysis early on. You bring your clinicians in to review it from a real world standpoint. Is it going to be viable in clinical practice? And then, no, okay, fine. Go back to the drawing board, do something else, come back. And then before you start going after more money for Rep 2 or, thereafter.
Yeah, exactly.
Avoid those sunk costs. The sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
All that kind of jazz. Yeah, so if you were a magical, all-powerful being and you could tweak one or two things of the way that we do all of this, this is a very broad question in terms of the translation of research into clinical practice or ideas or translating into a new intervention. For the New Zealand ecosystem, what would you change if you could?
That's a hard question. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. I mean, I think that we could invest a bit more in that next stage, right? Of so then what happens to those great ideas that have gone through the research and have been proven, have had clinical validation trials, and then providing the kind of the next steps. Yeah,
like the seed in the Series A, kind of that to get them to the next point, or is that even?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know exactly where it fits in the terminology, but yeah, I think it's not always clear to, as you said, like how to get these things up and running in New Zealand, as well as be starting to aim for an international market where you might be expecting to try and get the return on investment and build a business a lot bigger and a lot quicker. So that's always been a little bit of a difficult patch for people, I think, is, we really want them to do these things for the benefit of our health system and our population, right, for good health outcomes here in New Zealand. Yes. But you can't do that without making money. You need to make some good money to be able to invest in New Zealand as well. So there's this very kind of tricky patch somewhere in there. I don't know how you define that patch, but
because that seems to be the most common response that I've had when I ask that question. It's that we've got a good body, we've got TTM doing what they're doing, and then you might get 100K to do some, validation, and you might get a little bit more to do the next part, but then what? And there's no one really there to support it, right? You've got some venture capital arms, you might have a little bit, venture capital firms, but they play in the field that they play in, and that's not for everyone, and they might not have expertise in the area, so there is a bit of a gap there. And I don't know what that might look like, whether it's MB being involved in providing, but it's the money tap, it's the money printer needs to be up and running for that. Interesting.
And potentially having some supported pathways in that bit as well. So we have been trying to think about that within the health system, but it's not just us either. It's broader than the public health system, but just trying to think about having some formalised supportive pathways for that part, so that new companies don't fall off the cliff before they manage to get their foothold overseas.
Yeah, so it was a valley of death. There's multitudes of those, right, across the course of your development as a company. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, so what was I going to say? We're going to have to cut this again. That's right. Looking to the future, what's next for your involvement with Te Titoki Mataora, or maybe we can throw it out wider to Te Whatu Ora.
Yeah, well, I'll start with TTM. I think it's so much fun to be involved with, and we've got some really good things planned. A couple of the programs that I really enjoy, one is the clinical experience program, where we get some postgrad bioengineering PhD type students come in and spend time with clinicians in the hospitals, and they just basically sit and observe and talk to a whole lot of people, and they look at what all the issues are, and they try and come up with some solutions to some of the problems that clinicians are facing.
That's cool.
That is always a lot of fun. And then we also do these tiki tours where we take these the research groups and the startups into hospitals, and we just do a big showcase basically. And so that in their lunch break or coffee break, we get clinicians and other staff to come and walk around all the stands and see all the new things that are being developed, and that gets them a little bit excited too, and gives them some hope that there's some cool things coming eventually.
17
and they
years
get
later.
to test things and try them out.
Right.
So we've got some more programs like that coming up with
cool.
TTM, which are lots of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not to make this about me, but my day job in clinical research, everything is so abstract because I might be directing a team or working with a sponsor or figuring out where we're going to take a drug or medical device for trial.
Yeah.
And it's not until you go down to the site level, it might be a hospital or it might be a research clinic, and you actually see it, you're like, oh my God, this is actually a real thing.
Yeah.
It's quite bizarre. So I did a master's degree. I would have loved to be able to have that opportunity. I think it's so cool to be able to get that experience, get that exposure, hands-on, seeing what's going on, where the opportunities are.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I think otherwise, I think, the whole space is just so interesting. I think there's loads of opportunity coming up at the moment. For me, I'm really interested, obviously, in digital health and AI, and seeing how medical devices and technologies now are starting to be, there's much more blending of those two things, right?
Yeah.
And that devices are now connected, and they're all about data, and they're all about, adding AI on top of the devices to make the devices much more usable and useful, and kind of user-friendly. Then you can put them in a lot more places as well, and they can really contribute in a whole lot of, it's kind of taken everything up a whole step as to where the possibilities are. So I think there's huge potential to be bringing together some of these big things that are happening in terms of digital advances and AI advances with the medical devices and technologies as well, for us to develop some really new, cool stuff.
Yeah. Because what I love about that, the AI interrogation of big data sets is like you might have no idea what's lurking in all that data. But once you get enough of it and you can separate the signal from the noise, you'll be like, oh, yeah, well, there we go.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows what it could be? Well, Robyn, this has been really interesting. If people want to find out more about what you do, your involvement with Te Whatu Ora, Te Titoki Mataora, where can they go?
Well, the website is the best place for Te Titoki Mataora, and that gives everyone the kind of outline about what's available there. So yeah, and I'm on there, but or otherwise, through Te Whatu Ora as well. So as I've said, I've got this great team that's all around the country. So if people want to get in touch that way, they can go through their local library and local research teams and get involved that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.